This session will continue to explore ASEAN connectivity for the future, challenges and opportunities for ASEAN-Korea partnership, with experts discussing key topics, including connectivity program overviews, Korea's vision and role, and pathways towards the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. Now, we are privileged to have 4 distinguished speakers with us for this session. His Excellency Ambassador Jeong-in, Governing Board Member at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, and former Korean Ambassador to ASEAN, will be the moderator for this session. Now, allow me to introduce our speakers. Dr. Intan Murnira Ramli, Senior Policy Fellow of the Policy Design and Operation Department at ERIA. Mr. Raymond, Vice President for Customs and Regulatory Affairs at DHL Express. Mr. Bingxun Seng, Partner and ASEAN Economic Advisory Leader at EY Corporate Advisors. And last but not least, Her Excellency Ambassador Elizabeth Buensuceso, Eminent Person of the Philippines to the High-Level Task Force on the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Intan Murnira Ramli, to share her valuable insights on the topic, an overview of ASEAN community projects and initiatives, challenges and lessons for the future. Please welcome her on stage with a big round of applause.
I would like to, first of all, thank the organizer, mostly, and of course the ASEAN-Korea Center, and the government of Korea as well, in terms of inviting ERIA to give some presentation in terms of our work in relation to ASEAN connectivity for 2026 to 2035, as well as as a reflection of the 15 years of ASEAN connectivity initiatives and projects. So, before I begin my presentation, let me briefly introduce ERIA, which is the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, which the institute that I came from. This is basically a global economic think tank that serves 16 governments, including Korea. And this is where our raison d'etre is to support the policymakers in making informed policy decisions when it comes to economic initiatives. So today's topic on connectivity is basically very on point in making sure that whatever initiatives that's been done in ASEAN actually makes sense, first of all, and at the end of the day, works for the ASEAN people and also our dialogue partners. And on behalf of ERIA's president, I would like to also wish everybody a happy new year, and hopefully that this year, which is under the good leadership of the Prime Minister of Malaysia, would actually be a good ASEAN year for everybody. So let me begin in terms of what is ASEAN connectivity and all its encompassing vision. I know that yesterday there was some talks about some of the strategic areas in ASEAN connectivity, but maybe I just bring it down to maybe some history of it, so that maybe when we come to practical information, it's also good to know the history. So first of all, as you know, that ASEAN community has 3 pillars, and this is where we note in the work that ERIA has done, we notice that connectivity is a very important enabler, because at that point of time, our research showed that in order for ASEAN to attain a more competitive, inclusive, and cohesive bloc, it has to somehow be able to narrow the development gap between the ASEAN member states, and at the end of the day, this would actually lead to a fully integrated ASEAN community. And most importantly, the ASEAN community, if you can see from the ASEAN community pillar, has a very clear pathway in terms of vision, and what can be seen in the Vision 5 of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025. It focuses on infrastructure, movement of people, and talent. So this is where we see it from day one. And also coming into 2025, and then coming now to 2020, the new ASEAN Economic Community Strategic Plan and ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan, we look at the focus of connectivity is already set up from the start. So since 2010, when we look at, ERIA was participative from day one in looking at the ASEAN connectivities discussion. Of course, we have several ambassadors here already are also participatory in that discussion, and this is where we see that the reason why connectivity is an important key is that there were fragmented elements. So we see that there are some initiatives that is not coordinated, there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of some sort like a problem in terms of cross-cutting in nature. And MPAC 2010 was the first document that attempted to address that in having some sort of like institutional arrangement to coordinate and facilitate cross-pillar projects. As you heard from the SecGen of the ASEAN-Korea Center just now, he mentioned already all the projects that were in 2010, and then it culminates into 2025 document. So from there, we see that the MPAC 2025 then sought to actually put together learning from the experience of 2010 and sought to add value to those elements in the AAC blueprint. So although in essence, if you look, what is the difference between MPAC 2010 and MPAC 2025? Here is where I actually draw in terms of the differences. In terms of, if you look at one, we started to be, first of all, a dynamic and integrated ASEAN community. That was the very basis. And then we had this physical connectivity, institutional connectivity, and people-to-people connectivity, and then the strategies. That was really to get our act together. And then learning from the experience, we go into MPAC 2025, having a more structured thinking, learning from how to be more competitive, inclusive, and with a greater sense of community. So this is where we come up with the sustainable infrastructure, digital innovation, seamless logistics, regulatory excellence, people mobility, as discussed yesterday by the first session. And of course, now what we are trying to come up is actually the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, ASEAN Community Strategic Plan, which is going to be adopted hopefully in quarter two of 2025. So with the vision, which I am not yet to be divulging, hopefully with those areas which is marked in gray, illustrated in this document. So looking back, why we need to look back is that what were the challenges then, and how better can we prepare for the future, especially with the ongoing challenges. You hear from the ambassador from Thailand in terms of the challenges, the geopolitical challenges, and then the trends that we are facing and the potential initiative that can be considered as proposed by the Deputy Minister earlier. So we basically had an honor to actually the Ambassador Bo Donchak of Lao PDR recently, which was the last year's chair of the ASEAN Connectivity Coordinating Committee, together with ASEAN member states, representatives, as well as representatives from this panel. So this is where we had the opportunity to discuss in terms of the what could be something that we can learn from the previous and what could be for the future. So this is where I think the beat should be, is that we see that, first of all, the challenges is that almost everybody agreed in terms of the capacity and the skills of ASEAN must be developed. Without competent labor or workforce, no plan will actually come into fruit. Especially like, for example, like you have the right person to actually fit in terms of delivering good or better digital service. So those are kind of example. But this doesn't mean that it can be just any capacity building or upskilling, rather that it has to be targeted in terms of what are the needs of ASEAN. And I'm glad to note that the government of Korea actually take that very strongly and actually have identified the areas that needs those talent development. And then second, in terms of the regulatory and policy, it's clear that clear, firm regulations has to be developed in order to make sure that all environmental, societal, and economic goals are entirely met. And talking about policy, the common issues about ASEAN is sometimes different sectoral bodies or line ministries in the government of ASEAN have conflicting policies, and seldom do they share. And this is where the silo mentality and work ethics again. And the third one, we see that the basic infrastructure in parts of ASEAN is still lacking, and this has to be the main driver which for ASEAN, and especially in terms of water, transport, electricity, energy, and digital. This, and from the way we see that creative public-private partnership must be there, and probably other kinds or other forms of financial cooperation. And the fourth is that ASEAN connectivity can actually simultaneously address sustainability and environmental goals together with economic. And this is where sharing of best practices, and I think Korea has a lot of best practices that can be shared. And in terms of the issue of financing also, the role of private sector to support the initiatives is very important. And technology-related in issues like, for example, like the growing trend in terms of how 4IR in the technologies are very much play a role in terms of the rapid innovation. And the last one is the issue of standards. And this is where having commonality in terms of standards for ASEAN is the main problem. And we need to see, for example, like some examples that ASEAN needs to be able to develop even its own standards in order to actually be able to be at the forefront of technology as envisioned in the core elements of the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. So another initiative that ERIA has done is that we did an online survey of, and I must say, issues about connectivity is often easy to understand, to be honest. But if you really look in terms of the whole gamut of the master plan on connectivity 2010, 2025, the common perception of public is that it's not an easy document. Because only those, the words is that only those who are in the work of doing connectivity will actually understand what it is. But it is not a concept understandable by the public. However, we did manage to capture in terms of what were the common challenges in the implementation of the ASEAN connectivity projects. And it was kind of anticipated that financial constraint in the cross-border mobility was the first thing. They say that is the public feels that movement among ASEAN countries is still a challenge or pricey. And second, to enhance public awareness of the project. The third is to streamline in terms of the regulatory process for cross-border. So different rules, immigration rules for different ASEAN countries. Although I must say that I see there is a trend of ASEAN countries to actually now facilitate the QR code or the face recognition as in Korea. And the fourth is to improve reliability and efficiency of cross-border logistics, which is particularly important with the rise of e-commerce. And having all those said, this is where I think we can actually see how the Vision 2045 ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan can actually be addressed. So having learned from all this in terms of the physical connectivity, in terms of institutional, and at the end of the day, the role of IT, which comes at the forefront for every single matter that we look at in terms of sustainable urban development, or whether it is digital innovation or seamless logistics. So what can Korea do in terms of the connectivity? Right now, we see these are basically the mapping in terms of what are the initiatives. Thanks to Korea, ASEAN benefited from all these initiatives. But the way I see it is that we can focus in terms of sustainable infrastructure, going beyond what has been done before. And this is looking at what, like, for example, Songdon International City, Sejong Smart City kind of thing can actually be used in looking at smart and sustainable urban development. And also, in terms of digital innovation, you could look at, for example, IoT-based system, where like the Seoul TOPIS, like the travel information system. These are something that we can learn and implement in ASEAN. And but the only thing is that maybe in terms of development assistance that Korea would actually contribute to ASEAN, you need to actually acknowledge the fact that there are varying level of development, and you need to be noting that different ASEAN member states have different infrastructure challenges and also coordination. And one important thing also, I note that the minister actually mentioned about the Mekong cooperation. This is something maybe you could look at even blue economy cooperation, like for example, like in terms of blue carbon that can be actually looked at. And so with that, given the constraint of time, I think let me stop here and maybe continue later if you have any other questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ramli. You may now return to your seat. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Raymond Yee, who will expand on enhancing ASEAN connectivity by sharing his views from the industry. A round of applause for Mr. Yee, everybody.
Thank you. Good morning. Maybe just a bit of background about me. My first job of my career was at the Secretariat in the 1990s. I spent a lot of time developing the ASEAN Free Trade Area when ATIGA was at the time called the ASEAN Free Trade Area. And since then, I moved into to industry, doing customs and trade work throughout the region, working with governments on reform and collaboration. So just to put some context as to why DHL was invited, and I'd like to thank the ASEAN-Korea Center for your hospitality as well as for your support and your invitation. It's because basically DHL is a global trade facilitator. We move shipments around the world. I'll give you a little bit more information about that. But let me just talk first about the MPAC. So as we all know, I'm not going to read through this. This is the MPAC 2025. But my focus is going to be primarily on seamless logistics and non-tariff measures, right? As Dr. Intan had alluded to in her presentation, I think these are some areas that are particularly challenging for the ASEAN region, particularly on the implementation of MPAC. Now, why is this relevant for DHL? Why is it important? Maybe just to give you some idea of our coverage in logistics, and you know, many other global logistics companies have the same thing. We are available, we are there in almost every country in the world, and we clear about 200 million shipments a year. So imagine we are submitting customs declarations for the movement of goods, over 200 million of that, and then 15,000 employees globally submitting customs brokers, customs clearance agents, etc., right? just basically about 2,300 flights a day that goes around the world. Now, who are the types of customers that we handle? I mean, in ASEAN, of course, in Asia, we are big. We are also quite big here in Korea. And we cover a whole gamut of industries. It's not just, your things you buy over the internet or whatever. It is big, but it covers what we call the B2B, the B2C, and then also the C2C, right? And so as a result of that, we do see the changes that are happening in the front line on the movement of goods, on the efficiency of supply chain. And let me talk about that a little bit more. So this is an idea, this is a schematic diagram of how we operate our service. If you look at the bottom right with the word number 1, if you can see that, it's actually Vietnam. So someone may order for a shipment to be picked up. The shipment gets picked up. By the evening, it goes into our processing center in Hanoi, and that's by the airport. And overnight, the shipment then goes into Hong Kong, which is our hub, where we operate a hub and spoke model because we want to maximize space capacity on the planes, right? Otherwise, there's impact on cost. Then from Hong Kong, we connect the flight all the way up to, as you can see there in Europe, Leipzig, right? Because this shipment is bound for Italy. So that's overnight at 2 a.m. It arrives Central European time in Leipzig. It gets processed into the European Union, and then it moves into Rome. And then from there, it gets finally delivered to the consignee the next day at 10:30 a.m. Central European time. So when you are sleeping, we are actually working because DHL facilities are bustling with activity throughout the night and the early wee hours of the morning. And so, and the reason why we need this is because supply chains are getting tighter. We call them just-in-time supply chains, right? The efficiency of supply chains, if you want to maximize your manufacturing, your distribution, your production, et cetera, time is of the essence. And so this is why it's so important when we're looking at connectivity. How is connectivity impacting this, right? So the efficiency of supply chains will be affected if there are border measures, just not at the border, but I also talk about the beyond border measures, right? Anytime you need to move, to process something, to move a shipment, or any delays in that shipment movement requires us to hold it, to store it, and to do further work processing, that is going to add cost to the supply chain, right? So this then impacts the efficiency, it impacts the degree of connectivity, and if it's cross-border, it impacts your degree of economic integration. Because if a supply chain is not efficient, if it's costly, a region may not be fully integrated economically, right? And so I call these choke points because the MPAC also looks at these as choke points. Any choke points along the supply chain, we would say from an industry perspective needs to be either eliminated, streamlined, or you impose it before the shipment moves or after the shipment moves. So this requires a change in policy, right? If you look at from a policy angle, what kind of policy tools do you use? What kind of regulations do you have that either that you may not be necessary, that can be further streamlined, and so on? And you think about regulatory excellence, the good regulatory practices. This is it. This is that kind of discussion that needs to be had in ASEAN, because if you see, when we move shipments overnight, it really needs to be fast, it needs to be efficient, otherwise supply chains are impacted, right? So then the question is, what is industry's view in terms of ASEAN integration? And here I take a survey that was done last year by the EU-ASEAN Business Council. It's the preeminent business council of European companies in the ASEAN region. And basically, if you look at the ones in yellow, it's not been overly positive, right? Although they still see great potential in the region. 96% of EU businesses believe the AEC is important, right? But they also feel a lot of the AEC objectives were never met, the ASEAN Economic Community objectives. In red, I highlight some of the other concerns, right? They see non-tariff barriers increasing, right? They see customs procedures as slow and burdensome. And they think that the 88% think that non-tariff barriers will impact the efficiency of supply chains in ASEAN, right? This is not me talking. This is the survey that was done by the Business Council, whom I'm a member of. So with that, I just want to give maybe from an industry perspective, I can talk about that because I'm no longer in ASEAN, an honest assessment of impact, right? Was it successful? Was it effective, right? The first thing for me is MPAC 2025 did not talk about customs procedures in reality. It's there on the document, but how much work on customs simplification and any commitments for connectivity this has not been seen and has not been recognized. Yes, I understand that there's a lot of work done on ASEAN cooperation, on customs and so on and so forth, yes, but how much of that is connected to connectivity? I think there seems to be a disconnect between the two. The other thing is that we also see in reality on the ground, as I mentioned, that we do customs clearance at the front line all over the world, including ASEAN. There's quite a rise in bureaucratic procedures and non-tariff barriers, as were also surveyed by the EU Business Council, right? Now, the MPAC talks about non-tariff barrier elimination. NTMs, they call it. We also call it, tomatoes, right? NTBs, we call it. The challenge with non-tariff barriers in ASEAN is that there is no governance, strict mandatory governance on the identification and elimination of NTBs. A lot of it, there's an NTB guideline that's in ASEAN that is best effort. It's not mandated. So there is really insufficient governance to really have an honest look at what these NTBs are, right? As a result, we are seeing more domestic regulations which are more protectionist and inward-looking, unfortunately, and I think this is a result of COVID, when countries begin to be more inward-looking, and this is impacting ASEAN connectivity. We also feel that, and I think Dr. Intan highlighted it maybe between the lines in the presentation, that I think ASEAN connectivity institutions need a lot more strength, a lot more teeth in order to ensure that all the different programs in ASEAN are aligned. Otherwise, you're going to have everyone moving in different directions. And from all the discussions I've been having with the different ASEAN sectoral bodies, not one time have I heard the word connectivity, unfortunately. So, I'm hope from a business perspective, because we work on the ground, we would like to see some kind of institutional change. In addition to that, although the MPAC talked about it, there was really no discussion on supply chain choke points. Right? It said we need to identify these choke points. There is none of that. And the good regulatory practices that I talked about, they're excellent. However, in ASEAN, as we saw from a speaker in yesterday's session, they are not mandated. They are just guidelines. So if I were an agency in a government who is issuing a regulation, and we have asked this of some ASEAN agencies, have you done a regulatory impact assessment? No. Have you looked at the good regulatory practice guidelines? Yes, but are they mandated and required to do a review? No. So these are challenges because from a business perspective, sometimes we ask, why is the regulation required? Does it serve its purpose? Can it be done in a different manner? I think these are some of the questions that still need to be asked. And last and not least is the discussions with industry and private sector, and I know this was also highlighted by Dr. Intan in her presentation. We do see some level of dialogue. However, what we've also seen is sometimes the dialogue that's done with industry is not meaningful. It's just to tick the box. You provide all your comments, but none of them are taken into account. So this is also becoming a big challenge, right? Doing this just for the sake of window dressing doesn't really address the concerns of people on the ground as they are moving shipments across. So I have to say, I understand having been in ASEAN that, the MPAC was quite a critical document. There have been really successful projects, but as I mentioned, I was focusing purely on supply chain and NTMs and looking at it from the connectivity of the movement of goods, right, which I think is critical, as I explain in my next slide. And so for me, it's really not a criticism of ASEAN, it's an encouragement that these are opportunities that I think are important that need to be looked at, perhaps. Now, then the question comes, and I think the Deputy Minister and the Ambassador talked about it in the opening, is what's happening geopolitically, right? From a business angle, we are all concerned with what's happening in a lot of things, right? All this, the narratives and the sound bites that are coming out from governments, from policymakers, that everyone wants to look inwards. Protectionism, and so on and so forth. From a business angle, I can tell you this is worrying. This is really worrying. If you have invested 120 to 200 million in a supply chain that cuts across countries, and you see news like that, the board will start asking you, have we made the wrong investment? Right? This is key. This is a big issue, right? And so for me, I think, just going forward for ASEAN, the time now cannot be even more critical. If ASEAN has relied on outward orientation, export-led growth, then looking inwards is never going to be the answer. It's a zero-sum game. That aspect is not going to work, right? So what are some of the things that, I've just highlighted, these are really some of the things that, I talked about earlier, right? At the end of the day, from a business angle, right, when I was told that MPAC is going to be 2045 now, I thought, how many more plans of actions do we need? Can we focus more on execution, right? Proper execution of a plan of action. I talked about getting more meaningful and effective dialogue with industry. I talked about looking at clear choke points. I talked about strengthening institutional mechanism, good regulatory practice. Now, people talk about harmonizing. Not every time when you harmonize is good, because if you have a process that is very bureaucratic and you harmonize it across ASEAN, you've basically added cost to a supply chain. You want to simplify before you harmonize, right? And this is something that within business we also look. You heard of Six Sigma, you've heard of, we call it first choice in DHL. We look at ways in which to streamline the process so that it's effective, right? Are procedures required or not? Then we talk about distortions and so on and so forth. So one thing that I thought was interesting that was discussed yesterday, we talk about sandboxing. I don't know if this is something familiar with governments, within businesses, within startups and so on. We sandbox an idea, and perhaps this is an idea. Can we sandbox between industry and governments ideas of how coming together, what are governments' policy objectives and what are business policy objectives, and finding, co-creating a possible solution from a regulatory perspective. I've highlighted this before. I think this is a massive cultural mindset change that is required, right, on the set of policy making for ASEAN. But I think this is the only way forward. We're looking at how, with digitalization, with how things are changing globally. So at the end of the day, these are not really new. That's why I talk about execution, right, as being more important. But at the end of the day, what did businesses want? We really want a stable regulatory environment, something that's predictable, something that will ensure that if I invest 200 million, 300 million on a supply chain that cuts across countries, I'm not going to lose money, because I have to be answerable to the stockbrokers, to my shareholders, at the end of the day, right? But this becomes even more imperative now because of the geopolitical uncertainty that firms in ASEAN are facing, right? And so this then begs the question, besides ASEAN becoming more integrated, getting stronger in its institutions, what can we do with ASEAN and Korea? And so this is something that I also thought about, and I think this is quite interesting. As I mentioned, with the geopolitical uncertainties, we see, of course, uncertainties on tariffs, right? That's one thing. The other thing that is also never talked about is export controls. These are restrictions on the movement of technology, right? And most countries in this region have that. A lot of these export control rules are also made in the US and EU. Now, these restrictions on the movement of technology does impact where you buy your goods, does impact where you invest, and so on and so forth, right? So we see, at least in DHL, that because we are at the front line, we see a lot of companies trying to ring-fence risks in their supply chain. How do they do it? They do a China Plus One strategy, right? They diversify their supply chain. They also look at where they can bring certain technologies from where, right? Because, as I mentioned, these export control rules are very complicated and they restrict you in how you move this technology forward, right? And then to add to that, supply chain resilience is key because, I diversify because the experience from COVID, right? Those bottlenecks from COVID. Now, the problem with supply chains is they're not easily mobile. If I have invested in a supply chain across borders, I am looking at a whole ecosystem. I have first, second, third tier suppliers who are supplying into that supply chain, right? You can't just move one manufacturing facility as a result of those changes. So this is very important. Policy needs to really look at what are the proper policy tools that develops and is conducive for a supply chain ecosystem, right? Now, while ASEAN is doing this and hopefully looking at deepening, intensifying its economic integration, I think some trading partners, the key critical partners like South Korea, can play quite a significant role. As you know, Korea's trade relations and investment relations with with ASEAN are already very, very integrated. I think there is definitely more opportunity. With the geopolitical changes, you know, they call people investing in ASEAN to ASEAN wash the investment. I don't know whether people are familiar with this term. And the reason for this is because certain US restrictions may be imposed on investments in ASEAN where the US may have an interest in placing restrictions. But if these are Korean investments, they don't necessarily impact US restrictions, right? There is no such restriction. So as a result, I think there is a great opportunity if we are looking at South Korea trying to deepen its supply chain connectivity, Korean companies, second, third tier suppliers, together with that of ASEAN. There is a lot, I think, there. Now, we also know that, this mindset of a small yard, high fences, I don't know whether people are familiar with this term, but it's something that's being used very to determine trade policy in the US. But I think, as a result of that, Korea and ASEAN can play a big role within this small yard and high fence, right? What are some of the ways in which we can develop supply chain ecosystems, technologies, FDI, R&D, and training, and so on, right? I think that opportunity is definitely there, and there needs to be further study. Which sectors do we start going into? Is it just semiconductors? Is it just electric vehicles? And the entire supply chain and the supporting industries for electric vehicles, is it biosciences, is it life sciences, right, and so on and so forth. There's such a lot of opportunity there. So, I think the advantage that ASEAN has is, as always, a lower cost of production, labor force, and more importantly, a non-aligned geopolitical stance, right? And I have to say this because trade is becoming increasingly used as a policy tool, as a security tool, rather than just for trade itself, right? And I think from a business perspective, this is worrying from a supply chain perspective as well. So, yes. So the last thing I would say is, if ASEAN doesn't get its act together, countries like India are already far up in terms of an alternative investment destination, right? For the China Plus One supply chain diversification strategy. And India is developing very quickly. They are looking very seriously at reforms. And that's something that ASEAN then definitely needs to get their act together. Otherwise, we may become a lost case compared to India. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yi. Now, Mr. Bingxun Seng will present on the topic, an overview of ASEAN connectivity and its post-2025 future. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning, and Happy New Year to everyone. So my name is Bing, and I'm part of the EY team that's leading the development of the ACSP, so the ASEAN Connectivity Strategy Plan, which is the successor document for the MPAC 2025. And what I want to do in the next 15 minutes or so is to really share with you the process that we've taken and provide a flavor of some of the preliminary areas that we're looking at in the ACSP. I think just before I begin, I think Dr. Intan has mentioned sometimes it's difficult to understand what connectivity is. There's all these terms on MPAC, ACSP, and then previously, His Excellency was also talking about different connectivity projects that's really going on at the sub-regional and country level. So, just why is there a purpose for ACSP and MPAC, right? I think really it's important to have a guiding document, to be sure there's a lot of connectivity initiatives that's going on already in different parts of ASEAN, right? But this document really is aimed to provide a starting point for everyone to be on the same page on some of the key issues that would then allow people to speak on on the same language to be able to collaborate better. So I wouldn't go too much into MPAC 2025 because Dr. Intan has mentioned, but as you can see from the first page, it's meant to really address the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 across the three, and it's cross-cutting across the three ASEAN pillars of political security, economic community, AEC, as well as the ASEAN social cultural community. So one of the critical steps that we took to develop the ACSP is to really try to understand the MPAC progress, right? The challenges that happened, and try to build that into the implementation strategy for the ACSP. And yeah, I just wanted to quickly go through a bit more of the progress that has been done on MPAC 2025. So the first one is the initiative to develop a rolling pipeline of infrastructure projects, as you can see on the first column. This was in response to a need to direct more capital into investable and bankable projects in Southeast Asia. And to date, there were 19 projects that has been designed, conceptualized from roads to power, utilities, and various transport systems. The second is the ASUS, the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanization Strategy, which recognizes the need for sustainable urbanization through deepening expertise among officials to attract funding and build up technical skills to develop smart cities, sustainable cities, to address the increasing trend of urbanization into various Southeast Asia cities. The third one is that we've developed through MPAC 2025 several regional frameworks from supply chains to digital data governance that again provide AMS with a starting point to try to harmonize where relevant standards and regulations in these different areas. And of course, as mentioned by our speaker from DHL, we must acknowledge that adoption of these guidelines are mostly voluntary. And what else can we do in the new ACSP to try to be more concrete with the implementation? Just on this slide, quickly touching on what Korea has done to contribute to regional ASEAN connectivity through various initiatives. I think the first one we can see is the 6 million training program for teachers for technical and vocational training sector, so TVET. This is delivered through the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, KCCI, and the Korea University of Technology and Education, Korea Tech. The second one is over a 5 million program conducted through the Seoul National University to fund training for AMS officials on data-driven smart cities, as well as to develop online smart city knowledge sharing platforms. The Korean private sector has also participated, contributed to connectivity in their own ways. One example is Hyundai in 2023, where they launched a future mobility school program sending teachers from Korea to ASEAN, primary, junior, senior high schools to teach innovations when it comes to mobility in the areas of, touching on big trends like autonomous driving, low carbon emission vehicles, so on and so forth. We've heard a lot about the challenges and lessons learned from connectivity in the last 10 years. But let me just quickly touch on a bit more of that, coming from the implementation of the entire plan, right? I think the first one is still the awareness of ASEAN connectivity. I'm not sure how many of you today really heard about MPAC before today, about ACSP, and what they are meant to achieve. So, really communicating that message, I think is important to stakeholders, not just in the private sector, but of course the officials in the countries, but also the community at large, right? The society at large. What do we mean by connectivity? Because remember, one of the main tenets of connectivity is to build the ASEAN identity under the people-to-people pillar of connectivity. The second one is on human and financial resources. I think while a lot of that has been mobilized in the last 10 years, a lot more is needed, right? Because connectivity really covers a whole gamut of issues. And with the varying development levels across different countries, this dependency on technical training is something that is always of need. The third is the coordination issues that exist when implementing projects within MPAC 2025, not just within member states, but across member states. So a lot more optimal coordination mechanisms are being discussed and built into the ACSP. And one of the areas that we're definitely looking at is, how do we increase sub-national, sub-regional collaboration to push forward some of these initiatives a lot faster and more effectively. The fourth includes bringing in new ASEAN partners to support connectivity, and for existing partners, including Korea, to widen their areas of support, to encourage different partners to collaborate through joint ventures, co-financing, as well as making sure that the private sector view is heard and they participate in the process. Number 5 is the emergence of new trends, which I'll touch about briefly later. But as mentioned, there are all these new trends that are coming out. So these are changing, the priority areas of different countries in ASEAN. And we do have to constantly update, ensure that the plan is updated to reflect these trends. The last one, it's on flexibility and adaptability of the plan with constant stakeholder engagement. So one of the key issues that we realized, in areas where they were not, in the MPAC 2025, that was not addressed fully, was because certain initiatives that were built in were no longer fit for purpose. So what sort of mechanisms in implementation can we develop in the ACSP to ensure that when things are changing, when stakeholders and countries' priorities change, there is a process and a mechanism to allow for the constant updating of the master plan. So on this slide, just shows the process of what we've done so far developing the ACSP. And as Dr. Intan mentioned, we hope to get this endorsed by the next ASEAN Summit somewhere in May of this year. But essentially, what we've done is we have 2 key modalities of engagement, apart from all the research that we've done on policy documents. First, it's a series of national consultations with country officials that were conducted to understand each AMS area of focus in connectivity over the next 10 years, and to get suggestions on how to improve implementation of connectivity initiatives. Secondly, and I think maybe some of you were present, was a 3-day workshop, a regional workshop that was held in Bangkok last year. We had over 100 participants from AMS, officials from relevant sectoral bodies in ASEAN, working groups, working committees, sort of co-develop and go down into the details of what the different initiatives and activities could look like for the next 10 years. We also were joined by various ASEAN partners, think tanks, multilateral organizations, including the like of AIIB, ADB, to identify opportunities that we can collaborate within the region. So we've developed a narrative draft, which is being negotiated and discussed at the ASEAN level. And hopefully, as I mentioned, we'll be able to have the finalized version sometime in the middle of this year. And I'll share some of the key areas where I can in the next few slides on the areas of interest for the ACSP. As part of all these engagements, let me highlight 6 key trends that sort of define how the ACSP is being shaped up, right? What are some of the things that are driving the development of the ACSP and the initiatives that's going into it? I think the first one has been mentioned by both speakers earlier, is the geopolitical shifts and trade, right? Things like China plus one, things like the tariffs, the uncertainties of the tariffs, all these are very pertinent issues when it comes to global supply chains, while regional supply chains. And at EY, we are seeing a lot of these questions from clients on where to locate, how do I protect my supply chains? How do I protect against, shocks such as sudden closures of certain choke points and whatnot, and which will lead to increased cost of doing business. The second one is really on climate change. Southeast Asia is highly vulnerable. There's a lot of statistics out there. And potentially, based on some studies, up to 11% of the region's GDP is under threat because of climate change. And so that's one key area that we have to look at. The third one is digitalization, which has changed over the years. Right? In the past, digitalization was mostly about e-commerce. Now we're talking about more frontier technologies like AI, like blockchain, like the metaverse, and what it means for businesses and connectivity in the region. And all these actually represent significant opportunities for sectors in logistics, smart cities, telecommunications, media, and even the financial sectors. The fourth trend that we really considered was the urban expansion and emergence of middleweight cities. This was something that has already happened, but it's actually happening again at an accelerated pace. So more than 129 million people will live in ASEAN cities in the next 20 years, and this create opportunities to address challenges such as the need to plug infra gaps, especially in transport, affordable housing, waste and pollution management, and to strengthen social services in the areas of inclusive healthcare and education. The fifth trend that we're seeing is financing. Innovation in financing, to be specific. So, as I mentioned in one of the challenges, many of these initiatives that we have in ASEAN requires that financial backing and funding. The good news is that innovation has opened up more opportunities for both investors and project owners in Southeast Asia. And here are some examples. The first one is the rise of green bonds, right, which have doubled over the last 3 years in Southeast Asia. That has been used to finance infrastructure given certain sustainability conditions. Those loans are being dispersed. The second is blended finance. So instead of typical donor funding or government budget funding, blended finance represents the strategic combination of public, private, and even philanthropic and private sector capital together to mobilize additional investment for sustainable development projects. And this has also grown rapidly in the last few years, with more than 25 billion being committed since 2023. One other area is fintech, where more SMEs are now comfortable of accessing new borrowing platforms, such as peer-to-peer lending, fund matching platforms. And finally, a point that was made in yesterday's presentation was the aging in Southeast Asia. We always talk about Southeast Asia having that demographic dividend, but the time the clock is really ticking down, right? ASEAN is aging quickly, and countries like Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia are expected to become super-aged societies in the coming years. And what it means is that we've estimated for ASEAN to invest around up to US 20 billion in age-friendly urban infrastructure to accommodate the needs of the aging population. And there's really a need to start embedding aging considerations into how we build our systems, including things like transport and city planning. So this is summarizing all the different trends. These are sort of the areas that are considered for the ACSP. Let me just make that clear again, that we haven't finalized the areas. We haven't finalized the sub-initiatives. But broadly, these are the key areas that are being considered right now. So the first one is on sustainable integrated infrastructure networks, where this includes the promotion of low-carbon, environmentally sustainable infrastructure, integrated transport solutions, including multimodal networks, digital infrastructure for open access and internet access in remote areas, and of course, cross-border collaborations using technologies such as GIS mapping for spatial planning, because a lot of this connectivity infrastructure are expected to be cross-border. The second big area is smart cities. So some areas under consideration within smart cities are rural transformation. Right? I think one big gap that we saw in MPAC 2025 was there's an overemphasis on some of the bigger cities, but connectivity is not for a few cities, but it's for ASEAN as a whole, right? So again, 50% of the people are still in remote villages and remote areas, which is why there is an emphasis now under smart cities of how we actually develop our remote areas a lot better and faster. Third, advanced technologies. They include improved digital accessibility, inclusion, by encouraging things like digital payments, to strengthen overall digital competitiveness, which means the whole education, understanding of financial systems, financial literacy. All these are all important issues when it comes to using technology. The fourth area, as alluded to also already, was cybersecurity. Particularly increasing ASEAN collaboration on cybersecurity governance and sharing of information and technology. Because again, a lot of this risk happen to be cross-border. Under trade, there is some emphasis on multimodal supply chains and to build up supply chain resilience to protect the region against shocks, as well as there are still major concerns in some countries like food security. So I think these are areas where I think DHL speaker has already spoken a lot about, and hopefully we'll go a lot more into it later in the discussion. The robust regional standards, so things like custom clearance, which was also mentioned, how do we move on to the next steps of regulation within the trade facilitation space for more robust standards. So things like good regulatory practices in circular economy transition was mentioned. The development of green supply chains, another big area, as well as how do we use digital solutions to improve customs, immigrations, and quarantine operations. The last area is higher quality exchange of people and ideas, which includes to boost intra-regional tourism, to increase cross-border exchange of students and workers, so labor mobility, as well as to strengthen regional identity and promotion of arts and culture at the regional level. So this is my last slide. So what role has Korea have to play in the future of ASEAN connectivity? As you can see, the connectivity focus areas are very broad, right? And coupled with the fact that many of these solutions would require tailored solutions at different jurisdictions, they represent immense opportunities for partners, including Korea, to impact, to contribute, and to benefit from the region's connectivity ambitions. Let me point out 3 particular areas where I think Korea has the know-how, expertise, and competitive advantage to actually make a real difference. The first one is on smart cities. Korea has focused on urbanization, industrialization, sustainable and smart cities for the larger part of the last 60 years. With a highly advanced ICT sector, Korea possesses significant experience on innovations in urban centers, including embracing cutting-edge technologies such as the use of metaverses, digital twins for city design and management. So these are all technical skill sets which ASEAN, in many parts of ASEAN, sorely require. So Korea's government and private sector can also use their extensive experience in smart city development to aid our connectivity ambitions by offering strategic partnerships, knowledge transfers, and of course direct investments into urban infrastructure projects in Southeast Asia. The second area is cybersecurity. Korea is particularly advanced in this area. It's recognized very early on cyber threats and have put in the investment in cyber defense infrastructure. This is accompanied by a legal framework that's robust and also a highly skilled workforce. So how do we help Korea to also fulfill its aim to establish itself as a global leader in cybersecurity? I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that in ASEAN. The last area is on the dynamic exchange of people and ideas, so more on the people-to-people connectivity and arts and culture. And again, we all know that Korea in APEC, right, globally actually, it's particularly successful in defining its own form of arts and culture and exporting them globally, creating massive economic and social benefits for the country. And this includes intangibles, such as having a very, very strong national identity. ASEAN has been trying to achieve a dual objective. First is to promote and celebrate the rich history of the member states' diverse culture and traditions across the region. And the second is to cultivate a cohesive regional identity that unites the people under a shared sense of community. So what does it mean to be ASEAN? That question has been asked a lot in the last decade, and I don't think we've figured that out yet. So this is where I think ASEAN can learn a lot from Korea as Korea continues to globalize its arts and culture. Korea can also go beyond its current forms of collaboration, such as the ASEAN-Korea Music Festival, to develop commercial blueprints, right? Roadmaps for ASEAN artists, filmmakers, educators, sportsmen, to actually replicate some of the success that we're seeing in this country. So with that, I'll stop here, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seng, for your presentation. As the last speaker of today's session, we are honored to welcome Her Excellency Ambassador Elizabeth Buensuceso, who will present on the topic ASEAN connectivity and the Republic of Korea. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much. And good morning and Happy New Year to all of us, including our online attenders. There's so many people I'd like to recognize, but Ambassador So warned us 5 times to keep to the time. So what I'll say is that the Korean government has appointed strategic officials to strategic positions to take care of ASEAN-Korea relations. I purposely chose a very general title for my presentation because I changed it 3 times already. This is the burden of being the last speaker. You don't want to repeat what the other distinguished speakers already so eloquently described. And so I was thinking, my value added here is that of an insider, trying to look into the future and giving some recommendations and advice on how we can proceed forward. My name is Buensuceso. I like how the Koreans pronounce my name, is correct. Buen in Spanish means good. And suceso means event or news. Good news. This morning, I'd like to give you some good news about the future of ASEAN. Okay, I have a very simplistic presentation because I'd like us to focus on certain issues and points that I'd like you to remember long after we say goodbye to each other after this forum. By the way, thank you very much, ASEAN-Korea Center. You've been very faithful in conducting the ASEAN Connectivity Forum. I think I've participated in 3 of them since 2013. Okay, I'd like you to focus on the word 4 here. I say 4 pillars of ACB 2045. Why 4? I am happy to say, as I said, good news. For the first time, connectivity has been elevated to the level of pillars. Before, people were just saying 3 pillars: political security, economic, and socio-cultural. Now, we, in the high-level task force, say this is a 4th pillar of ASEAN cooperation and also its external partners. Another word I'd like you to focus on is the word 2045, the number 2045. Some people might think that, 2045 is such a long time. So with the volatile political, security, economic, and socio-cultural conditions we are now faced with, even now, everything changes by the minute. How come you're looking at so long a time? Even the choice of 2045 is strategic because we want to be long-term in our vision, but with the agility, with the flexibility of reviewing and adjusting the vision anytime each pillar thinks it is appropriate. And another, oh, by the way, some of you might have heard of the ASEAN High-Level Task Force on the ACV. In the past, it was called ACV Post-2025. But for clarity, we decided to call ourselves High-Level Task Force ACV 2045 to impress on our partners that we have a long-term vision, but at the same time, we want to be agile and responsive. And speaking of responsive, I'd like you to remember the acronym PRIDE, minus the E, so that we will not be mistaken to be biased for a certain group of people. Anyway, PRIDE stands, this is the theme of ACV 2045. P stands for people-centered. I've heard a lot of sentiments from our main speakers, from our presenters, about how ASEAN can be responsive, can be people-centered, can serve of the people that they serve. So people responsive is one of the themes. R represents responsive. A regional organization that can respond to emergencies, to things that are happening in the world. And I stands for innovative. And this is where our young people are very adept at. D, of course, represents dynamic. So PRID, people-centered, responsive, innovative, and dynamic. We were created by the ASEAN Summit of 2021, but we didn't start work until the beginning of 2022, because our terms of reference were only issued right after that. We are composed of people who have been with ASEAN for a long time. Some of us, at least two, are former Secretaries General, Ong Keng Yong and Le Long Min of Vietnam. Some of us are former ASEAN SOM leaders. But definitely, we occupy different positions, but definitely all of us have a passion for ASEAN and to see it progress into the future. So we started our work in January of 2022, and we have already produced the draft of the ACV 2045, actually the paper itself. This paper has 5 parts, and the 4 or 5 things here that you see will be the components of this ACV Vision 2045. By the way, I want you also to focus on the term strategic plan. In the past, they were called blueprints, master plan. How come now they are called strategic plans? Let's go back here first. All right. They are called strategic plans because we want them to become strategic plans. We are strategic in our approach, and that means to say the strategic plan is composed of strategic goals. So we subdivided our strategic goals per pillar, and then the strategic goals are further distributed or subdivided into objectives, and then will come the strategic measures and the specific activities, and that is where our stakeholders will come in the preparation or implementation of the specific activities that we are looking at. Okay, I want you to be assured that this is a document that was not done in a hurry. we were very deliberate in considering the past to look at the future. And also, we tried to visionize what are these things that will affect us in the future. Some of them are listed in this slide. The mega trends that we considered are here. Of course, peace and security, major power rivalries, digitalization and its impact on the future of work, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, rising protectionism and barriers to trade and investment, supply chain resilience, blue economy, etc., etc. Name it, we thought of it. And we looked at these challenges as opportunities to make ASEAN achieve what it has envisioned for its people. Even, many of our speakers already spoke about rising protectionism and barriers, rising nationalism, etc., supply chain resilience. We made sure that these factors were considered in the preparation of the strategic plans. Okay. I want to go back to this number 5, institutional strengthening. I am an avid student of ASEAN as a regional organism. If you want to benefit from interacting with ASEAN, you have to know how it operates. What are its principles? What are its nuances? Warts and all. As I told you earlier, the people who compose the HLTF are people who know ASEAN, warts and all. And I'm glad to note that the people, the officials that Korea has nominated to push forward ASEAN-Korea cooperation, like Ambassador Kim here. He is an expert on the Philippines. And Ambassador Su is an old friend. Emphasis on the friend, not the old. He was your ambassador when I was also ambassador to Korea, and together we have accomplished a lot. Anyway, what I want to say is that there should be a focus on institutional strengthening. A lot of think tanks and academics dismiss ASEAN as an irrelevant, non-responsive body. But if you know how to deal with ASEAN, I think you can make the most benefit from it. Am I too, okay. Here, I'd like to focus on institutional strengthening. And this is what I want to say. Just to give you a glimpse into how ASEAN is so unique in its decision-making process. Personally, I had wanted to amend the ASEAN Charter. I've been campaigning for the amendment of the ASEAN Charter. But many of our friends thought otherwise. And so what happened? I'll be very frank with you. We were talking about the Myanmar crisis. And so we said, okay, there's another way of doing it. And we devised another mechanism to address the Myanmar crisis. I don't have much time to discuss that now, maybe in the next Q&A. A previous speaker already spoke about what are these core elements for the ASEAN connectivity strategic plan. Even the connectivity document is now called strategic plan because we want them to be strategic in their approach. By the way, the high-level task force, eminent persons group, were like the conductor of a symphony orchestra. And we have specific groups of committees who are drafting the specific pillars a specific strategic plan. So, ASEAN Political Security Community Strategic Plan, ASEAN Economic Strategic Plan, Sociocultural, etc. They're doing their own, they're drafting their own document, but with supervision and guidance from the high-level task force, because we want to address the shortcomings, let's say, of the past blueprints, and we can see the overall picture. So, previous presenter already spoke of possible areas of cooperation between Korea and ASEAN, and mention of sustainable infrastructure. Specific areas could also be, I have a list, but I don't have the time. Urban and rural resilience using technologies and innovative structure. This will be the main components of the ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan. Please do not confuse ACSP. Political Security, APSC. Because ASEAN has so many acronyms. By the way, when I was chair of the CPR in Jakarta, we produced a handbook of ASEAN acronyms and shortcuts. Anyway, digital innovation, as mentioned, and enhanced cybersecurity, financial payments, efficient and resilient logistics towards contributing to global value chains, regulatory excellence in the midst of rapidly changing policy environment, people-to-people connectivity towards a people-oriented and people-centered ASEAN. There is a possible seventh element, but we're still debating whether to include it in the connectivity strategic plan, because it's already present in the other strategic plans, which leads me to areas of enhancement for the ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan. And this is number one, cross-pillar and cross-sectoral coordination. It is in everybody's mouth. Everybody is saying cross-pillar, cross-sectoral coordination, but really, from an insider's point of view, there has been no substantial effort to address this. That is why from day one, in 2022, I have been harping about how do we make this possible. I'd like to be more optimistic in replying to some of the questions about how come this was not addressed in the connectivity master plan, etc. You know why? Because they are already present in the other blueprints. And therefore, focus must be placed on how this can be streamlined so as to avoid duplication. What issues, and they have done this very well already, what issues have political security implications? How is it being addressed? How are they being addressed in that pillar? What the issue, same issue being addressed in the economic pillar, a sociocultural pillar. Climate change, for example, is an issue straddling all the four pillars. How do you specifically implement them? And how do you measure? That's why we will also discuss in the next few months measuring tools in the review and monitoring of our specific plans. So cross-pillar, cross-sectoral coordination, we already identified several issues that straddle across. What do we do with them? My recommendation is for each pillar to adopt. For example, political security pillar, disasters, etc. They fall under disasters and effects, mitigation of effects. They normally fall under sociocultural. But in our vision, we want this issue to be present in all the four pillars of the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. So what I'm saying is that we are introducing real, substantive measures to address cross-pillar and cross-sectoral coordination. My solution is adoption. Let's see if the others agree with me. Number 2 is strong national institutions. We were discussing this earlier. ASEAN is a huge mechanism, regional organism, and the policies that result from it should be translated into national policies. That is why we conducted stakeholder meetings with parliamentarians, with the ASEAN Mayors Forum, with the local governments, to encourage them to translate into local, national policies and laws the regional commitment. I am happy to tell you that I was studying the various mechanisms and platforms that ASEAN and Korea have together. We have sufficient platforms. But the thing is, are we translating them into specific actions through national governments and local governments? And then number 3 is to find synergies with other external partners. Again, I'm happy to say that Korea has incorporated these ASEAN commitments into their own respective national foreign policy. The most recent example is the KASI, the Korean initiative for on the Indo-Pacific. Because the Indo-Pacific, AOIP, is one basic document that we will pursue in the immediate future. And then find synergies with other pillars of, especially on people mobility. Finally, if you can give me 1 minute, Ambassador So, I was telling you that if you really want to benefit from cooperation with ASEAN, businessmen, students, professors, the ordinary men on the street, you want to benefit more from cooperation with ASEAN, I recommend that you read this book because it is a study on how ASEAN works, how ASEAN operates, what are the principles behind, how do they solve problems, how do they approach crisis, how do they solve problems. And so thank you very much, ASEAN-Korea Center, for translating my book into Korean. I myself cannot read the Korean translation, but I trust that it is a faithful translation from the original English that was published by the ISEAS in Singapore at the end of 2021. It's as relevant today as before. And you can buy it digital by chapter. Singapore style. You can buy it by chapter, $10 per chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now,
give them.
Okay, I'll just do the closing remarks. Before we transition into the discussion segment of this session, I'd like to remind you once again to submit your questions through the QR code on your program flyer. And now, allow me to hand over the floor to our moderator, His Excellency Ambassadors Jeong-in and the panelists.
Thank you very much. And then actually, I listened to just your presentation, and which was very informative and useful, also very timely, given that just we are working on the Korea-ASEAN action plan and for the 2026 to the 2030, and then so that will be adopted in this year at the forthcoming in May, and then under the Malaysian chairmanship, I think just given that time frame, and then your input and suggestions will be very invaluable. So here just we have also some just MOPA our peoples. So maybe they will take your suggestions very seriously. So having said that, actually we have around 50 to the 60 minutes before just we will enjoy our lunch. And so actually I was so surprised that Ambassador Elizabeth almost kept the time. And then so actually thank you very much for that. Anyhow, just my way over the question and answer session is like this. I have 3 rounds of the Q&A sessions. First round is as a moderator, I will ask a different question to all just the panelists, and then followed by online question and answer session. And lastly, we have the Q&A session from the offline here, and then so it's depending on the time. So first, I would like to give a first round of the question to Dr. Intan, to my left. And what would be the challenges facing Korean government and the companies to take initiative on your 3 recommended area in slide 12, maybe such as sustainable infra, smart and sustainable development, digital innovation. At the opening session, our Deputy Foreign Minister, Kim Hee-sang, he just told us that one of our priority area with the ASEAN cooperation is digitalization. So that's why that's in line with your suggestions as well. And then Dr. Intan, you have the 5 minutes to answer.
Thank you, Ambassador. First of all, if you look at, when you talk about sustainable infrastructure, smart and sustainable urban development and digital innovation, one common notable development is that we see that there is already much improvement in terms of the sectoral alignment, in terms of prioritization, as well as governance in ASEAN. But of course, ASEAN is something which is an organism that is slowly but surely. And given that I'm not trying to be super nice to Ambassador Lees, but like what Ambassador Lees was saying just now is that there's a lot of thinking in terms of global ASEAN initiative under the AAC strategic plan discussion. So in that global ASEAN discussion, a lot of discussion in terms of how best to engage with dialogue partners. And I think in this, of course, Korea has been actively engaged with ASEAN Secretariat, but I think what could be further initiative that can be done is to have conversation as well around the entities that is relevant to ASEAN. For example, one of the start is actually, of course, area where the ROK is actually part of our governing board member, and therefore you are very much sensitized and privy to what are the possible challenges, what could be the possible solutions, and how best to actually navigate those issues. And if you look on, because the overall, even like for example what Mr. Seng was actually alluding to in the work of coming up with the ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan, the issue still comes across that how to execute meaningfully all these initiatives under the connectivity, because the very nature of the cross pillar, when you talk about sustainable infrastructure, there are many players that actually, it's not just about building, but there are a lot of aspects to it, and it boils down also to ownership. Who at the end of the day would actually be the owner of such project? This has to be identified for the upfront, and this has to be followed through in terms of, sometimes you can say that it's micromanaging, but it has to be sustainable managing in a way, and very smart way, or smart partnership in terms of making sure that project followed through, implemented well, and at the end of the day can be reviewed well. So that kind of possible work. And the second thing is that what is need to be looked at in terms of digital partnership, digital innovation, is that it's well and good, because in all our policy document you see, you must have this 5G network, you have to have all this blockchain system and everything. But the challenge is, again, goes back to the basic infrastructure. So this is where mapping whatever that you want to contribute towards the needs of each ASEAN countries need to be really discussed and work on, because it cannot be one shoes fit all. That's for digital innovation. And we see that, yes, it's nice to have. There's a lot of best practices that being shared, a lot of country visits being coordinated, but maybe have certain what could be the short, medium, and long-term kind of way of looking at it. How do you arrive at that ideal scenario? And the last one is that in terms of the smart and sustainable development, I must tell that Korea has a lot of good examples. And again, it boils down to infrastructure in the respective, because sometimes you have the drawing about what is good for your city, what can be there and everything. But I think most important what ASEAN member states did is about how to actually do good waste recycling system, or even transport system. These are the two systems or ecosystem that I think need to be actually at the forefront in your talks to ASEAN member states. So those are basically my ideas for now.
Thank you very much for your comment on the challenges facing three just your recommended areas for the Korea. And then also with my experience, who has been involved in the Master Plan on Connectivity 2025 as an ambassador to ASEAN together with Elizabeth. At that time, actually, we had the same problem with the cross coordination with the different cross-sector parties, and then so I'm wondering whether just still it is a problem, and then I don't know whether you can just visit to that issues if you have a time, and when you was asked just questions. Also, in that case, I will move to the another just panelist, Raymond Lee, and then so he is very good resource person, because he has been in the ASEAN Secretariat for quite a long time and followed by just working in private sector at the DHL, and that's why it might be very useful to the Korean businessmen and for the ASEAN strategies. So, Mr. Raymond Lee, my question is this. Do you have any practical suggestions for Korean government and the Korean companies to enhance ASEAN's skilled labor for the ASEAN's more participation in regional supply chain as a part of the ASEAN Plus One strategy, as you recommended in your presentation? So, as you know well, just we are suffering from the supply chain revamp due to the US and China effect, and both of them, in particular following the pandemic in 2020. And then the landscape is changing rapidly. So I think given that environment, we, Korea and ASEAN, needed to establish supply chains. That is very important. That is very important to Korea and ASEAN as well. On your perspective on my questions.
So, thank you, Ambassador. So I look at this from two perspectives. One is for business, the other one is for the public sector, the government officials. For business, I would say I would take a bottom-up approach, right? Well, if we are looking at Korean companies, look, Korea has competitive advantage on many, many sectors. The auto sectors, moving to electric vehicles, the beauty industry, semicon, telecommunications. There's a whole range of sectors. I think what's key is to make this driven from a bottom-up, from a sectoral perspective. Korean companies who are looking to diversify, moving into other locations, what are some of the challenges they are facing? From what I have seen, and I'm not, an expert on this, but from what I have seen, they always say the technical engineering kind of a skill set is one that is lacking. Another one that is lacking, and I think there's a lot that was talked about also, is digitalization. The problem with digitalization is such a broad area. And within the area of supply chain management, transportation, logistics, that is in itself a whole large area. How does AI, how does machine learning, how does robotic processes integrate into supply chain management? I think those are some of the questions and areas that could be looked at. And I believe, Bing, you talked about TVET and all that, and all that is critical. But I would say we take a sectoral approach, and what are some of the challenges that Korean companies, what's preventing them from moving and diversifying into the ASEAN region? So that's one. The other one is on the government side. So how do we change policymakers' perceptions that when they look at formulating policy, they take a more strategic supply chain look? They just don't take a zero-sum game approach. It's you either invest in my country, because supply chains, you can move different parts of the supply chain to different countries, right? Either be the core manufacturing, the distribution, the testing environment, the R&D, and so on and so forth, right? So this is where the dialogue with industry is so important. If different, for example, Korean companies, if you talk about, Samsung, for example, if they want to move certain parts to certain countries in ASEAN, but then look at the testing, look at the R&D in other parts, then the question is, what are the policies that are preventing them from doing it? Is it costing them in the supply chain in order to even make that move? Because there's investment that's required. So this is where I think public officials do need to have a more strategic look, right? It's not a zero-sum game. It's growing the pie for ASEAN, right? How do you then make policies that is conducive for all of this? I think this is very critical. One thing interesting is, Malaysia, Singapore signed Johor, Singapore Special Economic Zone yesterday, right? People ask the question, is Johor, with its south of Malaysia, going to compete with Singapore's Changi Airport? No. It's Malaysia's Johor is from a connectivity perspective, they're looking at Johor as connecting to second, third tier cities connectivity, right? Changi is the main hub for air connectivity. These kinds of discussions is where it's not a zero-sum game. There are complementarities between countries. How do we make policy officials, understand that, to see then what can be done? I know that the ASEAN-Korea FTA, for example, is a bit limited, in my view, at the moment in coverage. If we have elevated Korea to a comprehensive partnership, right, I think there's a lot more that can be done and not just look at tariffs, which is what the FTA is really handling, right? And looking beyond that and the more strategic level, what can we do in order to further deepen the supply chain connectivity between ASEAN and Korea, and then using that as a launch pad maybe to other markets.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bing, for your comment, Raymond Lee, for your comment. And then actually, when we are talking about China plus one, that doesn't mean we exclude the China from the supply chain. It is impossible to exclude the China from the supply chain because we connected with each other, and then so I think that is the reality. But the point is, as you pointed out, we would like to put our egg into the different basket. And we had the experience of pandemic, and so we need to focus on the resilience side, not only efficient side. We have been focused on the efficient over the 30 years during the globalization era. I think in that sense, actually, Korea and ASEAN needed to develop how to cooperate under the ASEAN plus one or China plus one, China plus X as well. X could be the India as well. I think just we need to broaden our perspective on this issue. And then actually, as Mr. Bing pointed out, or you pointed out, I don't exactly remember, then the intra-ASEAN trade has been hovering, remained over the 21 and 24%. I think over the 20 years, I think that many people are saying that, yes, this is why just ASEAN integration is not smoothly working on. But I have a different idea, and then yes, since ASEAN started to pursue ASEAN integration, actually the GDP over the ASEAN has been growing. Even though your growth has been grown, the ratio of intra-trade has been remained as well. So I think in that case, that could be a little bit different. And then so, yes, and then when we compare to the intra-trade in the EU and then NAFTA and then USMCA, that is small. But actually still, that is positive for the even though 21%. But we need enhance the ratio of intra-trade at least 35 and 40% as planned by the ASEAN over the previous years. But there is no such kind of real progress on this issue. And then if we have time, just I would like all of you to give us some your perspective on how to enhance intra-trade among the ASEAN countries. And then the reason why is actually ASEAN is our third largest trading partner, even as of the last year, which was announced yesterday. But most of them is trade, export and trade. But our relations, economic relations in ASEAN, using the intra-ASEAN trade is very low. So it's a time for the Korean companies to utilize the intra-ASEAN trade. That's why I was asking this kind of questions. Okay, my question next is Mr. Bing from the Ernst & Young. And then, yes, I listened to your presentation very carefully and very useful. And your slide, page 5, on the some challenges and the lessons impact 2025. So, and then I think just you provide us 6 challenges, such as improve awareness of the ASEAN, etc. So as you can see, I think that is common challenges to MPEC 2025. So also you shared with us key trend impact the future of the ASEAN connectivities on pages 7 to 8, which is also very useful. And then to save the time, Ambassador Elizabeth skipped just her part of just key trend, and more or less that is the same. Actually, we are facing compound complex just crisis as well. I think having said that, but I was wondering what has been the implementation of bankable project under the MPEC 2025. With my experience as an ambassador at that time, that was a very big challenges. That's why just we listed up the some bankable project, but also you shared some implementation of some project, and I'm wondering what was the implementation of the bankable project under the MPEC 2025, and then there is any lessons from the MPEC 2025?
Thanks, Ambassador, for the question. I think as I shared earlier, the thing with bankable projects and infrastructure really was to address the first initiative of MPEC 2025 as part of the initiative to develop a pipeline of projects. We all know that the infrastructure gaps in Southeast Asia is very huge across all different systems, be it transport, be it energy. If you look at different statistics or estimates, it goes up to 100, 200 billion gaps a year, right? When it comes to just taking us up to what is required in terms of infrastructure. So, in a way, one of the key, I think, thinking behind that initiative is that firstly is to identify the right projects. What are the right projects to be, to be funded? That's most needed within different cities. And I think the outcome was that we did end up with having about 19 projects that were being taken to different stages. Right? I won't go into specifics of which project, what was the progress, but many of them, if you look at the results of it, like a lot of them had feasibility studies that were being done, and now it's either have kick-started or the procurement process to actually develop those projects have started. So in a way, I do think that it has success in some to quite a big degree. I think one of the challenges that we saw, and this is not just on MPEC, but if you look at project development as a whole across ASEAN, there are certain gaps in terms of how AMS convey their needs to partners, right, including Korea. And a lot of the larger projects, especially infrastructure, the returns of those projects, the economic payback of those projects are not very clear in the short term, right? So there is a need to really conduct very robust economic feasibility and financial feasibility assessments that can showcase the commercial viability, because nobody wants to just sink money into projects that become white elephants. So I think that is a continued challenge and one of the rationales behind having that pipeline project, but it cuts across other master plans and strategy plans in ASEAN. And just alluding more to that is the fact that a lot of funding has also, and capacity, right, resourcing has also gone into trying to help officials develop those project proposals. So I think, one of the way that Korea can play its part is, I realized that the Asia-Korea Cooperation Fund also have project proposal templates, right? How do officials actually fill in those templates to the degree where it's acceptable by the donor? And I think one challenge also, every different partners, and even at the ASEAN level, there are different project templates. They all ask for different things. And sometimes it's very difficult for a industry or a sectorial official to be able to develop those project proposals in all the different customized, different templates. So there is I feel like, to get past this, there may be a need to sort of harmonize a little bit what is needed, and for the funder to actually guide the project proponent on what they would like to see, right? So I think it's a two-way process. And to that, the last thing is, we spoke a lot about private sector investments and participation into such funding programs. Yesterday, I took a quick look, just browsed through the different projects that ASEAN-Korea Cooperation Fund has done in the last few years. And a lot of them, the proponents are actually governmental, right? So I think one way to encourage, and it comes down to awareness also, is to open this up to private sector, to actually come in and say, this is a project that I want to do in so-and-so AMS. How do we work with the ASEAN-Korean Cooperation Fund to together create, such a hybrid of a PPP in AMS. So I think, those are my kind of like quick thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, actually, after I listened to your comment, and still we have a problem with the implementation of a bankable project, because actually Korean businessmen, in particular with a lot of money fund, they are looking for the investment in the bankable project, but still they have been complaining about the bankable project. So I think just that will be the still challenges. Also, thank you very much for your answer. And then this is your turn, Ambassador Elizabeth, but this is a relatively very easy questions to you, because, and then actually I don't want you to be embarrassed with my questions, but I would like you to have your very frank just assessment. You left just your country official position, even though just you are still engaged just as a advice, foreign minister advice, but normally advice, you can say whatever you like, and then so that is I think you can give us some idea. And then my question is this: on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you assess Korea's contribution to enhance ASEAN connectivities over the 15 years? This is very easy, but we need your very just honest and frank assessment. But also, if you have assessment, what is your basis and reasons for such an assessment? I think just I am looking forward to your comment in this regard.
I love your sense of humor, so. You're asking me a question that might earn me a few enemies on the side, if I'm really honest. But I hope that my question, my response will be as honest as can be. You know me already as a person who would give more priority to factual assessments rather than to flattering people, audiences. And speaking of flattering, I am not flattering when I say that Korea is my favorite external partner of ASEAN. Why? You're not giving us headaches. You're not giving us problems. You know what I mean. However, there's another side to that. And that means to say, in the past, I think Korea has been a little bit lukewarm. I'll give you an assessment first of ASEAN-Korea relations. No major issues, no major problems. We are one with you when you express concern about the Korean Peninsula issue, etc. That's not an issue with, that's not a problem with us. My personal assessment is that this relation, ASEAN-Korea relation in the past has been lukewarm. And I'll give you some proof. But the proof is a positive looking into the future. For example, I want to refer to the statistics done during the monitoring and evaluation of the impact 2025, and it's similar to my assessment. You said scale of 1 to 10. How would I rate ASEAN-Korea relations? I would say 7. It could be more. But let me say, in the monitoring, it is 80% addressed. ASEAN-Korea connectivity, not ASEAN-Korea, ASEAN impact implementation rate is around 80%. And my assessment of ASEAN-Korea relations is 7 out of a scale of 1 to 10, despite the fact that we have no major issues. And I am saying that, yeah, because we have no major issues, we have been too complacent with each other. But this is changing. The mere fact that you issued, it's not too late. The CASI, one of the last major partners to do so. I think you did that in 2022. Yeah? It's not too late. Maybe you have a different thinking from me. You came right in time. But you must admit that it is a bit late compared to the other external partners. The second symptom, which is a good symptom, is the fact that you established comprehensive strategic relations only last year. When all the others, including New Zealand, I'm not comparing Korea with New Zealand, Australia, but also the fact that Korea and ASEAN have a lot of appetite. That's why in the comprehensive strategic partnership statement, you are saying that it will become meaningful and mutually beneficial. It's true. There is a lot of appetite on both sides to make it meaningful and beneficial. What I'm saying is, you can be a perfect 10 with all these new mechanisms and platforms that you have established with ASEAN. And in relation to that, I would like to focus on the fact that we already have these platforms, we already have this summit declarations, summit statements on this and that area of connectivity. We have to utilize them. You know, I always tell people they are not just idle leader statements. You know that we spend sleepless nights. Ambassador Su, you remember our sleepless night in the EAS negotiations in Manila on the eve of the EAS summit. We spent sleepless nights, but not just nights, months and months deliberating on these summit statements. And so we have to make use of them. And those statements should be translated into specific activities. And the same goes to the ACV ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan 2045. As I told you earlier, we already thought ahead of the objectives that we want to accomplish. But at the end of the day, We can only say we are successful when we have translated them into specific activities. And here I want to commend you, Sue, because it is in this end also ASEAN-Korea Center, because it is in the specific activity that you are able to give a soul, to give a body to the measures, to the goals, the strategic vision that was put in the writing, in the crafting of the strategic plan. Ambassador Su originated the concept for the ASEAN-Korea Cultural House in Busan, where I took a photo of myself dressed in traditional Korean costume. Very innovative idea. Your ASEAN-Korea Center has done specific activities to advance ASEAN-Korea cooperation, specifically connectivity. But I can only count by the fingers on my hand such initiatives. And here I'd like to go back to your proposal, but I think he was referring to a different kind of proposal writing effort. I think you were referring specifically to the infrastructure proposal writing effort, which is very technical, which needs the cooperation of especially the sources of financial resources, etc. But there is another a proposal-making effort that you can also do, and I think ASEAN-Korea Center has already participated in this. Maybe together with the ASEAN Secretariat, you can sponsor or conduct project writing workshops with the view to produce specific project proposals that are compatible with the ASEAN connectivity strategic plan. So it's specific. When we shall have issued the ACB 2045 together with all the other strategic plans, my proposal, I mentioned this already to my other colleagues, to other eminent persons, is to develop a communication plan for this ACB 2045 to communicate it to all kinds of stakeholders. So after it is issued, there must be conscious effort. I just gave you a sneak preview just now because most of the points are still being debated, negotiated. So I'm not at liberty to give you the full view. But when we shall have issued it in May 20 this year, I propose that the contents of each strategic plan be communicated to the public. For sure, we already consulted the respective stakeholders, the human rights people, the business people, government people, local government, etc. But this is the opposite. This is the other way around. We, ASEAN, must communicate the plan, the strategic plans to the people who will implement them. So maybe we've done this in the past. We conducted project proposal, making seminars and workshops whose products would be project proposals that you can submit to satisfy the objectives and goals mentioned in the strategic plan. So what I'm saying is that it's not too late. Korea has been very active lately in pursuing a more strategic partnership with ASEAN with this. There are other, I have them in my notebook, but there are other platforms. They're not just idle statements. Make use of them. This is the ASEAN way. We're not very fond of treaties or formal agreements. We come up with leader statements, and those leader statements can be the fodder to produce specific projects and initiatives that will give body and soul to the vision of the leaders. So this is how I propose. We can make it 10.
Okay, thank you very much. And then for your two concrete proposals, developing communication plan, also workshop on develop project focusing on the next impact. So actually, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs will maybe take into consideration, I hope, even though I left just our ministry, and because that is very good suggestions. And then we have only 6-7 minutes and then to go, and then so I don't think just we have the enough time, but just we will take one or two questions from the online participant, and then actually we cannot go ahead with the third round of the offline just questions. And then yes, we have the question here, but all speakers. And then the Korea ASEAN Center has been hosted this connectivity forum for more than 10 years, exactly since 2013. As MPEC 2025 has been concluded, where are your thoughts or suggestions as to how to center organize the forum in the future? And there are any component that you would like to center to add in the future forum? This is very relevant questions. And then I will give a 2 minute, but 1 minute give it to you. And you got.
I already.
Okay, in that case, just I will give just time and to the all three panelists, and then she gave already answer. So, just floor is yours. Dr. Intan.
Thank you. In terms of, I think the 12th ASEAN Connectivity Forum is very good in terms of it actually have the day one where you invite perspective from all the parties. So that is good. And having the strategic program today to actually see an overall how does it work at the end of the day. That's one. So perhaps more in next year, this year, what could be done, maybe picking up from the new document, which is ASEAN Connectivity Strategic Plan, 2026 to 2030, hopefully it will be ready by then. And then the other components is that in terms of, to add, is just that what kind of value that, I mean, of course, it's pretty early to assess, but the components will be that what could be, what else in terms of relationship of Korea that can actually be enhanced in ASEAN. So I think that's already enough for maybe this year.
Next time. Raymond.
So just to pick up on the theme of supply chain connectivity in the business sector, I'm just thinking outside the box, whether it's possible to do a joint ASEAN-Korea basically supporting a whole event that involves businessmen from both sides, including the ministers, then maybe a panel of all the ASEAN investment ministers with questions and answers from the business angle, right? What are the opportunities? What are the tax incentives? What are the and so on and so forth? I don't know if that's ever been done. And of course, in addition to that, because for businessmen, it's also about visibility, right? FDI, some of it is marketing, some of it is branding. Can this be done back to back? And if there is ever an ASEAN-Korea summit with the two leaders in there, if we're really serious about taking this to the next level of ASEAN-Korea partnership and involving, as we say, the other legs of diplomacy, which is the business-to-business sector, can this be done more explicitly? I know in the past, I've seen this done in the US. ASEAN ministers, the entire ministers fly to the US. They sit in one whole panel with discussions with the US business sector. What are the concerns? What are the issues you have? I think what ASEAN needs to hear is what concerns with Korean multinationals who want to invest in the region, right? And what can ASEAN do about it?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I agree that I think we do need more private sector, maybe from the industry chambers to come down and ask questions. Apart from that, I mean, one of the key themes that I realized also was that ASEAN as an organization is very complicated, and there's a lot of all these terminologies that's going around that may not be easily understood. So there may be a precursor, sort of document or ASEAN Korean Center could actually hold, almost like a familiarization session, right, to kind of talk about all these background stuff first, get it out of the way, and then we go down to the details of how do we actually implement parts of the plan and how the actual collaboration mechanisms look like. Because, we spend a lot of time just trying to talk about ASEAN, trying to get people to understand what that means. And if that is done as a pre-work, I think it will be a lot more effective. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much for your comment. So actually, as you told us, and then the connectivity issue is not so easy. So actually, even I've been involved in that issues quite a long time, and it is not so easy. And so your suggestion might be very useful just for the Korea ASEAN Center to do something in this regard. So actually, this is the end of our session. So actually, even though we couldn't take questions from the in this room, actually, I'm so pleased to have this kind of real expert from the ASEAN. So, and then please give just them a big applause. Thank you very much. This is the end of the session. And then before the session, just I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the Secretary General of the Korea ASEAN Center for hosting this very successful forum this year. Thank you very much.